I'm Joe Weinman. It's a pleasure to finally have the opportunity to stand up here in support of Cloudscape.
For more than 8 minutes.
I've got a distinguished panel, and if there's a single common unifying theme for this panel, it's broad heterogeneity. I'll let everyone introduce themselves, but we do have a sequence, so we'll go not just in linear sequence for introductions, so feel free. Start with Jonathan.
You just want an intro, do you?
Yeah, just
thanks,
2
Joe.
hours or less.
Thank you very much. So 2 hours about my...
Yes,
okay.
background. Start with kindergarten.
I know a lot of people in the room, and a lot of people know me, so I won't spend a long time. I'm Jonathan Sage. I lead IBM's policy Europe-wide on cloud and on another related topic, which is cybersecurity.
Hello, I'm Robert Bond from NIST. I serve as the NIST Cloud Computing Program Manager. I used to work with Don Leaf, who spoke earlier. I've taken up the cause at NIST, and you could hear what we've been doing lately.
So, good morning everyone. I'm a regular here in Cloudscape. It's my 5th in a row, so I know most of you know me also. So I'm Vaggelis Theodoros. I'm from GRNet, the Greek National Research and Education Network. And I'm working as a project manager there. I'm managing infrastructure-related projects, cloud and data centers and stuff. And this is my regular talk about Okeanos in a while.
Thanks, Jesus Luna. I'm Research Director for Cloud Security Alliance Europe. I'm basically in charge of technically managing our funded research project, FP7, Horizon 2020 with ENISA, and also collaborating to the international standardization bodies where CSA participates.
Hi, I'm James Mitchell, CEO of Strategic Blue. I'm a former commodities trader, now in the IT business for 5 years, applying financial cloud brokerage techniques.
Okay, thank you. So let's jump right into it. We've got an order that we worked out after careful, it's like a traveling salesman problem for presentations. And so what we determined is the shortest path to success is to start with Vangelis, who's going to talk about kind of his experience in building his own cloud and why, and then we're going to go straight into sort of NIST metrics, SLAs, and security, then markets, and then we'll wrap up with policy. There will be plenty of time for questions, so if you just hold your questions to the end, then we will be good. So without further ado, Vangelis.
Yeah. Okay, good morning everyone. Yeah. So this is almost every year I give a talk about our service, so I guess this is a small introduction again what we're doing and where we're heading and how we are progressing. So what is Okeanos? Okeanos is a cloud service, infrastructure as a service. It's a government-funded project. We started in 2010, developed ourselves. The goal was to offer advanced cloud computing capabilities to the Greek research and academic community, and this is actually our task as GRNet, to provide infrastructures to the research and academic community in the country. And free of charge, so actually we're getting funded by the government to develop all these services and provide it for free. So we decided to build it in our own software stack. It was 2009, 2010, so there were not many offerings back then, or at least they were not very mature. So we gave it a try, a couple of things. Eucalyptus was one of the things that were very popular back then, but we figured out it didn't want to do what we wanted to do. So we took this quite a big risk, and we invested on developing our own team architecture, and we developed this cloud software called Synefo, which actually means cloud in Greek. And right now in year 2015, we're in quite a mature state that we're offering a complete set of IaaS services, IaaS resources, compute, networking, object storage, and so on, a complete stack. And this is, together with the software and the services, we also set up our own data center. So it was really a big project. Really, we built the data center from scratch, specifically with Okeanos. We bought all the machinery and so on. So it was really a big investment back then, and still is. So by all means, it was a successful attempts. We right now have thousands of users. We almost all the students in universities, researchers, research teams have adopted it. They're using daily. So it's some numbers there of daily usage and how many VMs have been spawned over this year. So really big numbers. We have various numerous use cases, and I have to say, although the research community is our target, is our main business, the service itself is generic. So we're not targeting specifically scientific applications. We're targeting whatever kind of applications. Actually, we now don't actually know our users are running. Some of them are lab experiments, others are web-based applications, or some might be some torrents being downloaded and served. So this is it, and we have explored also internationally, apart from the big institutes. So it's been part of various institutes like the ETL Predictive Cloud Task Force. It's one of the cloud stacks that being used there. It's used in the Cellar European project that is working on advanced cloud elasticity technologies. As we are part of GEAN, so we are participating in GEAN3 projects and GEAN projects, and it's part there as a cloud offering. The Okeanos Global is an open service for all those who have access to GEAN. They have EduGain credentials. You can access for free cloud resources using the username password. We've been done some scientific applications like the Uber Cloud HPC experiment, provide resources there. So this, as a result, end up having all our resources full, or the data center is complete now. We are overcommitted. There are too many VMs, right? More than we should actually right now. So we have, each at the moment, we're really facing again a big challenge. We have to expand all Woodbury. So we have to expand in terms of compute capacity. More machines have to be added. New capabilities, people are asking for more. Like in PaaS level, more services, or in a higher level in the cloud hierarchy. And people are asking for quality. I mean, having them for free resources is good, but they want them to be stable, they want them to be fast, they want them to be easy to be accessed and programmed. And so all these are challenges we're facing right now, and we try to face them. Right now, at the moment, we're expanding our capacity. We're building two new data centers, and we're running a couple of procurements. I'm responsible for quite a lot of them, and really building bricks and mortar is quite a tedious process. It costs a lot and takes a lot of amount of time, so it's a big investment for us again right now. And in terms of functionality, we will start providing kind of quality of service-like things like disaster recovery capabilities. We will provide service like Hadoop, automated application deployment, application repositories, these kind of things. So we're taking the fast there. And so, as I said, this is a public funded project, and although we are a private company, we're functioning as a private company. All this is basically money from Greek government structural funding and funding from the EC in the context of the European application we participate. So there is an issue there of sustainability and continuous funding of this. The good news is that we have been included in the national research infrastructure roadmap, so we're going to get some funding in the years till 2020, although with a delicate situation in Greece right now with the economy, we're not exactly sure if this is going to be sufficient. And of course, there is quite a few projects that we will participate in the Horizon 2020 context. But we're thinking also about commercialization, how to actually can exploit this in a business environment, how we can sell it. Although this is a bit tricky, there are some legal issues there, since we are public funded. Exactly, directly selling what we have built is not exactly legitimate, but we're trying to find ways actually to business explore it. Trying to find pricing models, how to price it, how exactly it costs, and how we can sell it, and generally how to exploit it in a business environment. So this is the stage we are now, and I'm happy to be here in this specific panel. I'm sure you can find some good, interesting answers for that.
Okay, thank you so much, Vangelis. Let's welcome Mr. Mr. Robert Bach.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks, Silvana, for inviting me to speak and on the panel, and thank you for all of you in attendance. I'm going to speak about towards common metrics for SLAs. The first slide I like to start off with is always the NIST definition of cloud. I'll leave the definition up there for you to read at your own, but basically it consists of 3 service models, 4 deployment models, and 5 essential characteristics which are necessary to define a cloud service. It's important that you're able to pick out those characteristics in the cloud services that you decide to procure. There's the model of cloud. It's very difficult to make a model of cloud look like that without having a smiley face in it. And what we're actually able to do is determine what is cloud computing and not how to build one. What we've developed in our reference architecture is a actor and role based model where we have 5 actors in the cloud space. Primarily the consumer and the provider. We have a cloud carrier at the bottom who moves the bits from you to the provider in a federal way, or even in your own business. You'll find that auditing is a very important function to make sure that you're getting exactly what you paid for from the provider. And the cloud broker plays an additional role, may or may not. Next. So here was our cloud computing technology roadmap requirements. Dawn alluded to them earlier this morning, but what I would like to focus on in this talk are requirements 3, 4, and 10 to help the procurement process along. So the first one is to get, requirement 3 is to get good language for service level agreements. 4, know how to clearly and consistently define your cloud services so you can make accurate comparisons between them when you're buying. And lastly, the metrics. So there's basically a 3-part process. 1, you decide what you want to do. So you lay out your business and technical requirements, and then you work with your cloud provider or cloud providers to determine do the services hold the requirements that you're looking for. So once you agree with cloud, once you pick your provider, you make the agreement, and your master service agreement and your SLA should connect your decision-making process and your provider together. Finally, we're going to use metrics to see if the objectives in the service level agreement are actually met. So what are some of the contents of a service level agreement? So there are business level and service level objectives, and each one of these overriding bullets can be associated with a set of metrics that you should define for yourself. For example, if we're talking about the cloud business requirements, you might have requirements to use standards or what type of logging you want to use. Finally, information management. A lot of times you want to know about the data preservation and location might be very important to you. Also, data seizure. What happens if there's an event in which some other nefarious activity happened on the cloud that you have nothing to do with, but because of the multi-tenancy capability of cloud, you might be on the same set of servers or hard drives where the incident took place. So you want to make sure that you still will have access to your data even in that case. Also, at the end of your contract, you want to make sure that you have a way to get your data back out, which is something that people don't really discuss. We have performance indicators for the technical side. So you see the characteristics a whole bunch of different characteristics, reliability, load balancing, durability, elasticity, etc. So what do those things mean to you and to your provider? So what you really need to begin with is a common vocabulary where everyone agrees what the definitions of the words are. So let's look at the tie-in between service level agreements and metrics. Service level agreements and metrics. So metrics are good for selecting cloud services. In the first image on the left, you can see how they're used in the decision-making process. You want to pick between cloud A or B, what properties do they have, and you will use metrics to make your decision. So in this case, they selected cloud B offering. When you're monitoring, you will use the same metrics in your service level agreement and your monitoring to make sure that you're actually getting what you paid for. Finally, one word on availability. So this is one of those examples in which availability might have multiple meanings to multiple people. So here is one example of an availability metric. So percentage of uptime, what is the available state? You might get 99.5 24/7, or you might get 99.5% available 9 to 5. Keep in mind those are not the same. One example would be service uptime percentage, and I'll just leave that there. This is in our latest document, NIST SP 500-307, which you can find online. Thank you, Joe.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Okay, continuing to some extent on this theme, we've got Jesus Luis Garcia, who's going to...
Luna.
Sorry, Luna, sorry. You're going to cover sort of the continuing theme on SLAs and security. So are you going to come up or?
No, otherwise I'm afraid I'm going to break something. So I can take it from there. Just maybe the remote, or I can also use the keyboard. That should not be an issue. So actually it's a follow-up to the talk, the presentation from Robert. Now we have been talking about SLAs, how these SLAs can use also to get more information from the provider, the use of the metrics. So how can we actually leverage, translate this to the SME? So that's the actual challenge. As you may know, SLAs is something that has existed on the IT industry for years. So it has existed since the times of the telco providers. It started afterwards with the mobile telco operators, and now we are talking about how to use service level agreements in the cloud. And I fully agree with Robert. Actually, SLAs is something that we can leverage to take a decision, to make an automated decision process from the broker perspective, or to allow potential prospective customers to take a decision about the cloud service provider that better fits his or her needs. Historically speaking, most of the SLAs that we can find out there, they were based on performance metrics. There are a lot of performance-related metrics on SLAs. Sometimes if we want to take a decision about the CSP to use, we can take a look at the price, also the kind of reputation also that is associated about a big CSP, a small CSP. But what about security? This is actually an interesting challenge that we are tackling from the CSA inside some of the working groups and also with the projects in which we are contributing. But why security is so special, and this may also apply actually, of course, to privacy, why these parameters, these metrics are so special in cloud SLAs? The SLA definition, I think, I keep the one from Robert. They are doing the standard, so I am happy with that definition. So what about the security specification? How do we represent security on a service level agreement? So performance is something that we know the commitment, the CSP specify the thresholds, but from the security perspective, if we want to discuss service level objectives inside the SLA, first of all, we have to ask ourselves, how do I measure security? Because of course, if I want to commit to some threshold that has to be fulfilled on the SLA, I should have a way to measure that. And I should have a way to monitor the security levels. which is even more interesting because not all the security properties, not all the security metrics can be automated can be automated for the assessment. Some of these they need human intervention, which is kind of different from the traditional availability perspectives and some other performance-related parameters that you can do some degree of automation. If we arrive to this idea of measuring security, and as I have told you, this also may apply to privacy, inside service level agreements, what can we actually do? Well, we can do very nice things. So, of course, we have more transparency. We can provide more information to the customers, more information to the other service partners in case that we have cloud supply chains, to brokers, etc. That means more trust. Second, we can enable realistic levels of automation. If we know how to assess the security in an automated way, how to monitor the security, why not actually automating the full life cycle of security, not only from the planning when we need to take a decision, but also when we need to enforce that the security levels are being fulfilled, maybe automated or semi-automated incident response processes, how to notify the customer in case that some SLA is being violated. So we can actually start doing very interesting stuff with this. And of course, we need to create some kind of standard. We need to speak a common language between CSP and customers in order for this vision to arrive. But this is not easy. There are different challenges, and I fully agree with something that was mentioned yesterday, of course, by my colleague Daniele, that we should be talking not only about barriers, but we should be talking about challenges. The people there, and the SMEs in particular, they are already considering moving to the cloud, or they have to move to the cloud, or public administration will have to move to the cloud. So let's try to help them. Let's try to be this guardian angel to try to help them to move in a secure way to the cloud. From the pure SLA perspective, security SLA perspective, we share the conspicuous challenges out there. Standards. Bob has been talking about vocabularies, metrics, how do we represent metrics, and most important of all, so standards are very nice. We all like to use and to follow standards, but when you give the standard to the SME, they will be shocked. So the standard that we are currently working with ISO and also the collaboration with NIST, in particular from the metric perspective, and I have some experts here, I have Philippe, I have Wolfgang there, it starts, even for technical savvy people, it starts to be very, very complicated, very cloudy. So how do I translate these? How do I make these SLAs usable for the SMEs that want to move to the cloud? This is part of the challenge that we are taking. SLA Ready is one of the projects and we are participating doing this. CloudWatch is another of the initiatives. PIXA is another thing that we are trying, European projects where we are trying to provide this guidance to the SMEs to put on a language that they can understand the standard, to make them human readable really. Customer empowerment. We have been talking a lot also about the standards, SMEs, they need to take the cloud challenge. Yes, but how can I actually help the SMEs? Tools. We need to create the tools. We have been talking yesterday, if I remember, also from CloudWatch, we are also creating this Cloud Scout, it's called. So how do I create these tools, so not only for decision making, but for the whole life cycle? Once that I have decided about the CSP that I want to use, then how can I monitor that the SLA is being fulfilled? And how do I monitor in a way that I can understand what I am monitoring? So which is different to monitor everything, just to provide useful information to the customer. Well, this is one of the biggest challenges out there. Supply chain, multi-cloud, so all the collaboration that we are starting also with the Intercloud project from IEEE, this starts to become more challenging if we start thinking if one SLA is already complex, having several SLAs, and finally certifications of our SLAs. This may be a good question that we can discuss during the panel. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jesus. Okay, next, former commodities trader James Mitchell is going to talk about lessons from commodities that apply to the cloud.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, let's welcome James.
Okay, so I'm kind of a commodities trader. I used to go and buy power stations and large piles of coal and things which people say are commodities, but they're not really commodities. They are fundamentally different. Most people, when they think commodities trading, think exchange trading. So Brent crude, oil, is a commodity. Regular oil that comes out of the ground is not a commodity. it doesn't look like the definition of Brent crude. It is always off spec. There are ways of getting around this in terms of attracting money from the financial markets. The reason why this is important is these days power stations, analogy of electricity, are funded with about 20% equity and 80% debt. That dramatically drives down the cost of financing power stations. If we want to do the same thing with cloud and be able to do it cost efficiently and have a competitive market for cloud computing, we need to learn the lessons from analogous commodities markets. So if we look at electricity and IT infrastructure, both are delivered remotely, both can be used on demand, which isn't the same as saying you have to pay for it with the on-demand tariff. The capacity is perishable. If you don't use it, you can't use it later on. It gets produced in lots of different ways. Now here's one big difference. There's a power grid for electricity, and that mixes everything up. So when you are plugging into the socket in the wall, you can't tell whether it's coming from a nuke, from an oil-fired power station, a gas, wind turbine, whatever. There's a mixing effect that goes on. If you take coal as a comparison, when you build a coal-fired power station to deliver electricity, you normally stick with your supplier because you know that the coal that you get from them works. If you decide to trial new coal, which comes from a different supplier, it will have a different energy content, ash content, moisture content, sulfur content, and even if you know the specifications, your power plant will still behave differently. Now hopefully for those who've tried using different cloud providers, and you've read the specs and tried it and found it doesn't work quite the same, this should be sounding similar. Okay, so there are ways that the commodities markets have got around the fact that most things are not fungible, they're not identical. You do care which supplier gives it to you, and those adjustments should have a price attached with the quality difference. So all of these conversations about standards and metrics and SLAs, these all need to flow into the price.
Is that actually how coal electricity works? You just plug directly into the coal?
Pretty much, yeah. It's as simple as that. I mean, I've dumped it down a little bit, but broadly that's what happens. So, my point is, there is a wonderful analogy between electricity and cloud computing. Where it breaks down, there are other perfectly good commodities that are not perishable and so are less good for the main analogy, where you can get around all of the problems. To be absolutely clear, electricity is really complicated. I mean, I won't even go as far as the RC, but if you look at the fact that you have to balance not only the electricity on a second by second basis at all points across the grid, not only the electric field, also the magnetic field. So you've actually got power stations which are spinning and not generating electricity. We don't have to do this for cloud. Cloud is actually simpler. So I'm a commodities trader. I've been in IT for 5 years. Oh my God, what you do is complicated. But please don't assume that electricity is simple. It's not. However, we can learn from what's been done with electricity. So back in the day, if you're a big company and you use a lot of electricity, oh my God, security of supply issues. Why on earth would you let someone else generate your electricity? What if it goes down? Terrible risk. You might start sharing with other people and building a grid between the two of you, community cloud, and then the utility comes along and, oh, everyone's worried that they're a little bit flaky, but the cost is just unarguable. And if you didn't already have your own power station, then that disrupted the rest of the market. All of these analogies we can learn from, and I look at this market, and frankly worse in Europe than in the US, and we're reinventing the wheel, muddling along, trying to find the best path without trying to learn from history. So I'm the most junior of 3 people from Morgan Stanley in the commodities group. This chap here basically founded electricity trading. He was hired from a utility. He was the first person hired from a utility by a Wall Street bank. This guy used to be at the Bank of England as a developer, and he ended up managing across Europe all of the power supplies and the power trading. So this is basically a slightly simplified, but still looks scarily complicated, view of what a wholesale traded market will look like in the future. You have the cloud providers at the top. You sometimes have a cloud reseller. The crucial thing about the reseller role is that they are taking on capacity planning risk from the cloud provider. So these guys want that 100% utilization that Joe was talking about earlier on. Then down at the bottom, you've got the customers. The customers can buy directly from the cloud provider. There's a whole load of problems if that remains the standard and 98% of what everyone does. You then have the channel. Now the channel can actually be vertically integrated. Everything on the right could be done by one cloud provider all the way down to here. This is the sales team. Now, there's a crucial thing, which is why this is important. The customer wants to buy on totally different terms to the way that the cloud provider wants to sell. Cloud provider has just built out a power station, paid a whole load of money up front. The customer wants to pay as late as possible. At the very least, you want to inject finance to bridge that gap. In addition to finance, you need to apply risk as well. And that's where hedge funds come in, and then eventually get cloud exchanges to reduce the cost of this. That's me.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now we're going to go from Strategic Blue to Big Blue with Jonathan Sage from IBM. Please join me in welcoming Jonathan.
Can you hear me? I'm going to take you back to the Brussels bubble world of cloud. I think we've had a great variety of presentations looking at the technical aspects, SLAs, metrics, which of course are incredibly important, and then a very illuminating comparison with the electricity market. So what I'm going to talk about is if I can get this thing to work on it. Is it right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. I'm taking, there's not a deliberate mistake on these slides. It'll say College of Europe 2015. And that's because every year we, along with a few other vendors, go to the College of Europe in Bruges, and we give a 4 to 5 hour session on the topic of innovation and regulation. So to what extent is regulation impeding innovation? And this year we did it on cloud computing, and it made me sort of sit back and think, you know, what's happening around commission policy, what about cloud computing, and what sort of thoughts come out of that. And excuse me if some of this appears to be a bit negative, but the world we live in is still that the Snowden revelations of 2013 are creating FUD. It's not yet blown over. A lot of us hoped that 2014 would see the market sort of restabilize, but concerns about surveillance and privacy are still pretty acute, according to lots of, part of this is anecdotal, but I think we feel it in the marketplace as well, industry-wide. The result of that is a certain level of digital protectionism, trade barriers, manifestations of the cloud market being restricted, and data protection and security are often used as excuses. Now, you might argue that's all very well and good. What's wrong with that? The answer to that may be that it's not necessarily very good for cloud take-up if it's restricted or localized. The other big threat on the landscape is data transfer, suspension of the safe harbor agreement, because transfer mechanisms for data are the lifeblood of organizations. So when you talk about suspending methods to transfer data to different parts of the world, you're talking a multiplicity of really important channels that businesses and SMEs, you know, not only big businesses, SMEs rely on. On the positive front, you know, EU cloud policy, the developing of a sort of trusted framework for cloud, and I'm looking here at, Piers and Francisco there are doing a great job in continuing this work. It's really, really important. And that ranges from the SLA work, which is very much in line, I think, with what NIST is doing. You know, it's particularly the specific, the code of conduct, which Hans is here as well, is driving. Great bit of work. We're waiting for the response to that. and of course also on certification. Now, as DSM, Digital Single Market, is the new buzzword in Brussels, it easily gets confused with other acronyms, so get it in your mind. It's Digital Single Market, is the new digital agenda. Is this the chance to get the balance right or not? Just to see if I can get that to work again. So if you look at in Bruges, the challenge was to say, well, let's look at regulatory and quasi-regulatory initiatives. And if you look at cloud, the top thing, and I think you talked about it yesterday, is the data protection regulation, GDPR. That is one of the threats for cloud computing. And I'll go into why Joe's gesturing to me that I should eat the microphone. Also, cybersecurity, the NIST directive, is a real threat for cloud computing. When you look at cloud per se, there is a risk of backdoor regulation through GDPR and NIST. And of course, the new factor on the landscape, if that weren't enough, is the calls to reform copyright. Quite often, when you look at the early presentations on copyright, it's more about whether you can watch your football in Brussels because of geo-blocking, or whether things are available in different jurisdictions, which is a valid concern. But copyright is also really important to cloud. You've got the Software Copyright Directive for interoperability, and you've also got the notion that cloud, if you're not taxing devices through levies, that maybe you start taxing cloud instead. So the notion of putting a tax on consumer end, or possibly a levy on servers, is something that frightens us. So again, on more of this topic, if you look at soft and hard regulation, whilst there's no specific legislation proposed on cloud, you do have the 2012 cloud strategy, there is this notion of backdoor regulation. Now, the real issue that concerns us in industry is the current clear separation between data controller and data processor, which underpins at least enterprise cloud. It's a little bit technical, but it's really important to have this clear distinction between the cloud user, which is the processor, and the customer, which is a data controller. And I'll mine down a little bit into this by giving you an example. And this is used in the context of cybersecurity. If you have notification, just to go back a bit, the Network and Information Security Directive, NIS, mandates security breach reporting for internet enablers across the board. So this is the Commission proposal, says if you have a breach, a security breach, in any type of cloud or internet enablers, that means search engines, e-payment gateways, and so on, you have to report it. And the reason for that is to say, well, these large platforms otherwise wouldn't do it. Now, the problem is that not everything that you associate with data breaches, security breaches, are critical. And if you have we heard a lot about hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, community cloud. The typical environment is you have one customer that may be a bank, maybe a power station, and there'll be a whole lot of different cloud providers. Quite a complicated supply chain of cloud used for different purposes and functions, who are then data processors. If you mandate that cloud makes, you're going to tell me to stop in a second?
No,
if you start mandating cloud providers to notify security incidents, you create all types of confusion. You have people reporting out, it could be liability, could be confidentiality, that actually negate the terms of the contract. So you create, again, rather like in GDPR, you create an overlap between this clear distinction between controllers and processors. Now, I think behind this, and I'll stop, I promise.
Okay.
Behind this
Well, I know
is
that you'll eventually.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to do an analogy because Joe did some great analogies, and mine's you're probably going to rip it apart. But people assume in cloud, in the sort of cloud environment, that you always, when you offer cloud services, that you always touch the data. You know what the data is, you handle the data. Now, a large section of cloud services is, so-called IaaS, and you don't necessarily know what the data is. And the analogy I like to make is, I don't know what they're called in Belgium, but in the UK and in the US, the big craze is these big yellow storage boxes. What are they called locally? You know, you have big warehouses, and what they are sort of agglomerations of places where you can put your furniture or luggage or whatever. Are there any in Belgium? But you all know what they are. Have you seen them? Anyone not know what they are? Okay, so you've got these things. What service do they provide? They give you a very, very safe place. You come in, probably with a trailer, and you put the furniture or whatever you have, you lock it away in some compartment, and there's high security, there might be air conditioning and so on and so forth. Do you actually then, if you're running one of these, do you say to the guys bringing the stuff in, sorry, I need to inspect what's in that parcel. Let me look at your sofa, let me look inside the cupboard. No, you assume, you have terms and conditions, and you say, if you're using our facilities, you're not allowed to put explosives, drugs, whatever, illicit substances, illegal, whatever, you can't do that. And you trust the customer to do that. The same thing is with IaaS, that you don't actually touch the data. You assume, you give people the facilities, you provide state-of-the-art networking into the data center, you have different provisioning models, you have incredible security.
You're telling me that all these years I've been storing drugs and explosives and I wasn't supposed to?
That's right, you have to go and get some.
All right.
But the analogy,
Very much.
but the analogy is that you don't necessarily touch the
But
data.
to be fair to everyone, I know,
Yeah.
Mike, you have a lot of content, so.
No,
sorry, but-
that's me done.
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
done. Thank you very much. And thank you for helping. I've got some work to do when I get home.
Yeah,
obviously,
you
with my
need to get that
storage
stuff up.
facility.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Now it's time for the interactive portion, and I know we've got a question from Mikael. So why don't you jump in, and then we'll get any other questions from audience members directed to anyone on the panel. The question could be, Jonathan, can you finish the rest of your presentation after being rudely interrupted? Yes.
Well, let me eat the microphone.
Yep, you're good. You're
Yeah,
right.
it's on. Okay. Actually, this is a question to Strategic Blue, I think. I see a lot of tweets going on that oil and coal are not interchangeable, but electricity are. So what struck me in your presentation is that everything is, I resonate with everything in a comparison, and the fungibility of electricity, but in the cloud it's not. Now for me, that to me resonates very strong with a statement of that you need strong standards in the cloud as well. Because in electricity, you have strong regulations on the transmission specifications of electricity, the 10 kilovolts going through landlines, then the specification of your plug, even though you have hilarious plugs like in South Africa and in England, but also you have the output specification, and you can trust that you get 220 volts on 50 hertz out on your wall socket. So either consent with me or tell me and convince me why not standards in the cloud world for that corollary.
So I get very nervous when people talk about standards instead of benchmarking, because you know all these railways that we've got, if you try to plug that into 230 volts, it's not going to move. You have to have the ability to innovate and apply the right solution to the right scenario. There isn't one perfect analogy, Joe might argue with me here, between, say, electricity and utility computing. You've got to pick and choose the right one that is applicable in the circumstance. And we will find that you need to take a slightly different model in place than the US compared to here, maybe UK versus Netherlands, and you see that throughout the electricity markets. There's maybe 30 deregulated electricity markets around the world. They all behave differently, depending upon the market makeup. Regulation has a big effect on how it works. And I think that we're best off trying to take something like, if you take pork bellies are traded. These are animals. Clearly, two pork bellies are not exactly the same thing. The farmers find it very useful to be able to trade pork bellies, but the idea that you actually want to standardize pork bellies, personally I find that a bit repulsive, and a lot of that has gone on, and I don't think that that's something that we want to emulate. We want to encourage innovation, not stifle it through inappropriate use of standards. These guys are generally looking at areas where standards, I believe, are appropriate, But for example, standardizing on the virtual machine as the means of delivering cloud is a horrible idea, because sitting underneath that you've got CPU, RAM and storage, which are traded separately by Cloud Sigma, for example. That's a little bit like standardizing on the trading of a power station, which is a mixture of carbon credits, whatever the fuel is, and electricity. It makes no sense to do that. There are traded markets and virtual power plants, but they are linked in price to the underlying commodities.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Raise your hand if you've got a question. Andrew.
Hi, I've got a quick question about standardisation for SLAs. And how much of the SLA metrics you've been referring to are actually cloud specific?
Okay, so how many? Could you repeat the question one more time, please?
Yeah, sure. How much?
Do you want to decide if you're going to answer it
Yeah,
still?
exactly.
How much of the metrics in the SLAs that you've been looking at are exclusively applicable to cloud? Because when you start looking at, well, the availability, the reliability, the security, these are all SLAs that we take into consideration for traditional IT contracts anyway. So what's the difference? Where is the differential?
Well, at this point, I don't have any differential. What I do have is a methodology for deciding what those metrics are and what they would be for you in your specific case. We realized that we needed metrics. We've just got about a year's worth of work into it, but we don't have anything, I would say, that is genuinely cloud specific like you're mentioning.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Next question.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Just very quick, because also we have been collaborating with the working group that is creating the metrics at NIST. Well, I'm not sure that someone actually from cloud was provided that metric, elasticity. So there are metrics that are quite tied to the specific nature of the cloud. From the security perspective, also, we can tell you that most of the metrics that we are proposing through the CC group on SLAs, now that I see the slide here, that these are actually derived from security control frameworks that are applicable to the cloud. In our particular case, the metrics, we call them SLOs on the CC report that we released last year. These were derived actually from the cloud control matrix. So from the pure cloud perspective, security perspective, yes, these are cloud related. We are trying to identify them, and actually we are starting once again this working group on security metrics for the cloud via CSA. So anyone that is interested, just contact me or Daniele during the day.
Just going back to Mark's point, it's a very good question, because a lot of the SLAs are going to be the same as you'd have in any outsourcing contract. Where there's probably more attention in cloud is on, because it's more dynamic and you can componentize more easily, is on exit, interoperability, termination, which is possibly new in terms of metrics. So how do you get off the cloud? What about termination, getting your data back and so on?
I mean, I think there's complexities all through, right? Because if you think of storage as an example, it could be locally mirrored, it could be remotely mirrored. You've got different IOs per second. You've got different pricing models.
Data location.
Right, so different degrees of replication.
From the resource provider's point of view, I agree, but you cannot. Well, as I said, we don't apply SLAs in our service. We don't offer. But on the other hand, we have a network underneath. We have SLAs for that. And we see that the cloud is an added value service over the network. We apply SLAs in the data centers. We have, for instance, we apply the uptime certifications, and we were not certified, of course, but we're trying to follow the tiered layers of the data centers, this stuff. So there again, the infrastructure provides a level of quality of service. But again, there's a big gap. There's a huge amount of other services, other things that are running over there that really need also to be defined somehow and certified.
Okay.
Maybe.
Oh, okay. We have one first here. Okay, then 3, 4, kind of over this way. We'll figure it out. Okay.
All right. Can you hear me? Yeah. So I would like to ask the question, like, why would we have different SLAs for cloud versus on-premise or whatever we call it? But I think that's a little bit of a basic question. So, but what are, for instance, on that part, doing or thinking about in terms of proactive KPIs? So one of the challenges with monitoring is that if you check availability, well, you will always measure like too late. Like you will always measure, okay, so now we lack availability. What can you do as a carrot type of situation to providers to be operationally excellent? And what can you do in terms of contracting and making sure that the provider is doing proactive work rather than making sure you're keeping just above the lowest level, so to speak, in the SLA? Weird question?
Yeah, I'm unsure how to answer that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm unsure what type of carrot that I could actually provide to
Right,
the.
and I think this is an
To me,
important
aren't
question.
market forces a big carrot? Like in the US, there was a Netflix Christmas Eve outage that caused AWS to completely change its inter-region data transfer pricing to enhance reliability. So market forces is one answer, but you have Jesus.
Yeah. If I understood correctly the question that may be related with the timeliness, how you can get some assurance on the information that actually you are monitoring in order to make sure that it's not just arriving too late. So there are some initiatives that are moving in that direction. One of the initiatives, but again, this is something that is not new, that used to exist on the risk management field. Actually, from NIST, the risk management framework used to consider already continuous monitoring. Right. So this is one of the points that we want to make sure that the metrics that we are designing, this is an ongoing work. So it's taking place in ISO. Actually, 2 weeks from now is the meeting, yeah. So we want to make sure that the metrics that we are designing, they open the door. It was one of the slides that I was putting there, so that we can continuously monitor in order to provide this fresh information either to another CSP or to the customer. But this is one of the key terms that nowadays we are pushing on this standardization.
It seems like the cloud providers are all like, you've got trust.salesforce.com and similar sites that describe live availability. But okay, we've got 3 or 7 more questions and like negative 17 minutes. So quick question and 1 quick answer from whoever on the panel jumps in first.
Rather than a question, is a remark on the previous question. It's not a matter of specificity of cloud SLAs. It's very much a matter of composition of micrometrics to have a single bigger metric. So the reference to availability, for example. The work that is ongoing in NIST and in CSA and in ISO is there to define a set of metrics that then, when composed, are going to define availability in a way that availability can be measured in different ways, but according to the same rules.
Okay, so a comment on a comment. I'm not sure that everyone agrees with you because there are people doing very fine-grained metrics where you can select your trade-offs as to what you're looking for in terms of price, performance, availability, et cetera. But Alan, quick question from you. And then we continue this discussion at lunch.
All right, so pushing back on the continued trend of people to use the term SLA to describe the cloud service agreement. An SLA is a tiny fraction of the cloud service agreements, and the components of those have nicely summarized this in this panel, but using the word SLA to mean your cloud service agreement. I want to push the contrarian point of view and ask for comments from the panel. And this isn't original to me, I'm simply reflecting what I read in the literature now. The SLA is probably your least adjustable component of cloud computing, according to this contrarian view. They're essentially fixed by the service providers. What you're talking about in terms of a cloud service agreement, which has almost nothing to do with the actual SLA. Google is not going to change its uptime. It may change some, you may be able to choose from predefined categories. But the big service providers, the things that people talk about in SLAs, are already fixed. You're essentially not going to be involved in this. Why, then, is there so much discussion on the SLA topic when really we should be talking about terms of cloud service provision that are almost irrelevant to the SLA itself?
This
So I'm just, hold it close.
Yeah. This question came up in the industry group on SLAs. It's fundamental. It meant us going back and starting again from scratch. And it's really, really important that you separate what is a service level, a metric, and the actual contract. So I think you're right. And I agree with your comment about variability.
Okay, next.
So this is a very quick question. Do you think there's a role for machine-readable SLAs? Do you think we will get those from the public service providers in the future that we can use with, say, WS agreement from OGF to automatically find matches and combine services?
Yes, we are actually working on that, and we are working very close, again, to Bob, to make sure that these machine-readable SLA formats are fully compatible with the standard.
Okay, so answer is yes. Next question.
My wife develops corn varieties in Germany, and they have a board, for an American company actually, and they have a board that reviews the varieties that are developed every year, and they give a rating out as a government agency. In the U.S., they don't do this. It's purely marketing, from the people who develop the varieties. So my question is, could you see such a certification level from the governments coming in the future to say, of course that could be bad, but say these are just, we review these service providers and here's it, you decide what you do.
Sounds like me. Okay, I'm happy to
So
take
broad-
that. Go ahead. Yeah.
Broadly, yes. I kind of rather it wasn't dictated by government, but was kind of put together by the industry as a whole, and ideally by the buyer side in collaboration with the sell side, not just mandated by the providers.
5-second answer.
Yeah, no, I think the key thing is not to have one silver bullet certification scheme, but sort of healthy competition, but some sort of vetting, and NISA and the Commission again. I think the slide's still up on the specific interest group on certification, which does, it's not finished yet, but that's what it tries to do.
So next we need a certification scheme to figure out which certification
Yeah,
schemes are
exactly,
correct.
exactly.
Okay, yes.
I was going to be devil's advocate a little bit, which maybe is not a good question at the end.
You've got 32 seconds to be devil's
Okay,
advocate all you
so
want.
my question was, when I look at the commercial market for cloud, there's a lot of innovation going on, and I actually see divergence between all the providers in reality. So although there's a lot of work going on around standards and SLAs and everything else, my question is, does the panel have any sort of evidence or grounds to think that standards will actually be adopted within cloud in a way that they haven't been adopted in other IT services, such as disaster recovery, for example, which would also be a critical service that enterprises would buy? But you couldn't really point to a standard in disaster recovery or say that there's some sort of interchangeable strategy.
Any quick answer? Okay, I'll answer. So there's a mix of divergence and convergent effects always, and so the providers tend to want to differentiate, whereas customers need some basis for comparison. So just like cars, where there's auto standards on things like miles per gallon, but they're all differentiated in style and performance, I think you'll see a mix. Okay, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much. We have an even better panel, I know that's hard to believe, right here, right now. No, it's not any better, but join me in thanking the panelists.